Okay, so we're going to start with this, and we'll go to the next slide because I'm going to try and go through these quite quickly. So we couldn't use the template because we're kind of a different kind of creature. So next slide. So we're identified as a network project, which made it kind of different. And we also transitioned from cohort 1 to cohort 2, which was really important to give some background information. Next slide. So the Center for Innovation, we're a system-wide initiative that provides infrastructure for peer support, staff roles. So the pieces to know about this is that we do have 12 partners identified there, which are hospital, community agencies, employment, residential, central access, housing, CSI. You can see there how many peer support staff we are, how many peer support supervisors across 30 programs. We've also expanded since then to include peers in sex trade work, street outreach, overdose prevention, shelters, family corrections. Next slide. And the biggest piece here is that in cohort number 1 is that we could not find the research was authentic peer work being offered. Next slide. So luckily that's when we were partnered with E-QIP, and we started using all the tools back then, plus we took all of the trainings over the course of a year, which really gave us the tools that we needed to work with given the scope of our project. Next slide. So I just want to give the problem statement, aim statement from the original one, because basically what we came down to is that peer support is based on values, and henceforth it's really hard to measure that and get foundationally down to how do we transition that into behaviors per se. Next slide. So we also searched everywhere, and Jody can chirp in wherever here, just at Everest, because we have Jody as an evaluator part-time. And we realized there's no baseline data that spoke to this. So we actually had to, in cohort number 1, we had to develop a research tool, a validated research tool going through ethics, all the process, methodology, for the integrity, quality, and impact of peer support. Next slide. So we had to create a validated tool. And this is where Christina was going to chirp in, and if she's not
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yay.
Do you want to pick up from here, Christina? It's the validated.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I did enter the PIN. I don't know what happened. Does it matter? I'm on now, so I'm happy about that. Hi, everybody. So this is the validated tool that's divided into 3 sections. The first section is really the unique portion of it where we translated values into actions and behaviors so that we can more easily translate what authentic peer work needed to be. And people were able to then rank from disagree or strongly disagree to strongly agree whether they felt those values were in action when they met with peer support workers. Then they were able to actually tell us about the quality of that experience. So we asked how they felt about services they received in mental health and addiction before ever meeting with a peer support worker, and they were able to circle as many of those emotions as they felt. And the second question was, how did they actually feel about the peer support work they were currently receiving? And the final portion was the impact. So if people were receiving authentic peer work with its integrity, they were feeling good about the services, which is what we were finding. Was it actually creating some personal impacts and also system level impacts? And so this was the tool we'll use, and I'm going to talk more about it when we actually talk about how we used it in E-QIP 2.0. So we could probably go to the next slide. Okay, so then it brought us to this point where now we had this wonderful validated tool that could help us start to assess whether or not authentic peer work was happening in practice and what kind of impacts it was having to people accessing services in our system. So you saw that we have all of those community partners, and we meet on a regular basis through communities of practice and ongoing discussions. And what kept coming up was there was challenges in peer support in hospital settings. It was being offered, but there was differences sometimes in the philosophy of the way hospitals function and support and how peer support was being rolled out there. And we had very little way to figure out what exactly that looked like and what the issue was. We just knew that there was something going on within the hospital setting that we needed to better understand how peer support was really rolling out there. So that prompted us to apply to get this E-QIP 2.0 project. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is our lovely team of half floating heads and half people in the room. So as other teams have mentioned, we had quite a robust team as well. Aside from the E-QIP coaches and support, we had Chaylin Bates, who's from Trillium Health Partners, who is the manager over there of the clinical services. We have Ed Castro from the Mississauga Halton Lynn that was supporting as executive sponsors. We had Daniel and Kevin, who were the voices of direct service. They were the peer support workers that worked on the inpatient unit at Trillium M-Site, and then myself and Betty Lou Christie and our evaluator Jody Orr from the Center for Innovation and Peer Support with Support and Housing Halton. So we had all of these wonderful brains around the table, and most pictures are there except for the Where's Waldo. That's Laura. She appreciated the photo. Next slide. So what we needed to do, as I mentioned, we knew there was something going on, but we didn't understand where necessarily the issue was. So we first had to collect the evidence. So in comes the validated tool, which we created, which is in the top corner there. And that was administered to people that were on the inpatient unit, that were patients on the inpatient unit. And we collected over 51 surveys over the course of a month. So that obviously took quite a bit of time for us to make sure we got that process in place, waited to collect. When you're evaluating people's experiences with only 2 positions, if people had time off. So we were juggling some of that. So that was one story. As Betty Lou, I think she addressed as I was trying to call in and call back. Was it the sphere? Did you talk spheres of influence? No. Okay. We always, at the center, we know that implementing peer work affects multiple layers, and depending on how things are going in any of those layers can influence service. So we talk about how people engaging in service feel about things, how the peer support workers feel, how the supervisors, how the system, how teams. So we basically took that approach in trying to figure out where the issues lied. So we asked people that were engaging in service through this survey. We did a peer staff survey. So all peer workers that were actually working in hospital settings, we narrowed it down to looking at that data. We asked them what their experiences were around the implementation and how they felt within their teams. Then we asked the supervisors similar questions about how they felt about implementation and supporting peer workers in their workplace. And at the moment, we're actually just in process of administering a survey to clinical staff that are working with peer support workers on the inpatient unit to see what their comprehension and understanding of peer support work is. So we're gathering all of the evidence. Next slide. So what we ended up finding out was for the individuals, so the people engaging in peer service on the inpatient unit, they were experiencing a high degree of peer work integrity. So all those values were in action. They were experiencing a high degree of quality with the actual peer services they were receiving. So we saw mixed emotions of how they felt about service before peer work entered. And then we saw very high positive emotions when we asked how they felt about the peer services they were receiving. And then some key domains around the impacts. And I'm just going to read a couple of these out that are actually on the survey. So it made their experience with mental health and addiction services better. It helped people deal more effectively with crises in their lives, helped improved ability for self-care, more confidence to tell providers their needs, connect to appropriate supports and services, and became more hopeful about their life. Those were agree and strongly agree. So we saw that the peer work was being done well and was creating some really positive impacts. And we included some personal accounts of that. I won't read all of them word for word, but a few of them. I felt heard, highly supported, encouraging, and empathetic. It allowed me to feel understood because they listened to our concerns with compassion, and patients need to feel a true sense of being cared for without feeling like a burden. There were some really strong quality impacts we knew that the peer workers were making on the unit. Next slide, please. So then we realized that it wasn't necessarily the peer support work that was being provided well. We didn't know if it was being provided as often as it should, because then what started to come up was there was a lack of role clarity noted by peer support staff and supervisors that came up in the peer surveys. So peer workers noted the level of understanding among hospital staff to be low. So the 3.5, and Jody, you can chime in, I'm not sure if you're unmuted, but the 3.5 was a scale, again, we were asking people to rank from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So a 3.5 was fairly neutral, and we had noted that anything under a 4 was cause for us to be, concerned or flag that as a potential issue. So a 3.5 out of 5 was what that was getting. Peer support workers also perceived their roles as less valued in comparison to other peer staff roles, and that was actually different from the perception of supervisors. So peer staff workers were experiencing something quite different. And then we are still waiting on the results from the inpatient staff. However, just a preliminary scan, there is an unclear understanding of what peer work is supposed to be doing. So we kind of landed on the fact that increasing that understanding is really where we needed to go in order to increase the impact of the positive impacts of peer support in the unit. Next slide. Sorry, can we go to the next slide, Debbie?
We're trying.
Oh, okay. No, that's cool.
There we go.
I just didn't know if I covered my mic. So then our problem statement was just kind of in a Coles Note version. So since 2015, the role of peer support workers has not been fully understood by the multidisciplinary staff on the unit. The lack of role clarity, as noted in those surveys, has led to barriers to authentic peer support work being provided to patients, and peer support workers being asked to do work not included in their scope of practice. And so our aim is really to increase the inpatient staff's understanding of the peer support work in order to increase authentic peer support. And so we have a percentage there. We haven't necessarily listed it yet because we obviously want to see an increase in how peer support workers and supervisors are perceiving the knowledge base on the unit. But now we also want to see what the survey from the inpatient unit staff is saying, so we can understand that needle that we're going to hopefully be moving with some of our change ideas. But I'm not there yet, and that was Debbie's wonderful coaching constantly. We weren't allowed to think of solutions yet until we really sat and swam in the problem. So on to the next slide is our diagnostic journey. So we all came together and we did a fishbone of deciding on what we thought could be some of those key contributing factors for peer support role not being understood. So we took those, we voted on them, which turned us into the Pareto chart, which is the next slide. And as it's slowly being turned, I'm just going to say that really what came up was that there was a lack of education around the peer support roles. So yes, there's a different philosophy and there was different things potentially contributing, but we recognized that if we didn't actually explain or we hadn't told anybody, that was really a key piece of missing information, especially in a hospital base that relies heavily on evidence. There wasn't really the evidence for a long time. So we kind of talked about that, which came up in the 5 whys when we said, well, why is there a lack of education, which is the next slide. And so really what it came down to is, yes, there hadn't been trainings provided to the staff, again, having shift work and different things happening, priority setting even on the unit. There's a philosophical difference, so we still really prioritize medical positions, doctors, nurses, as having the greatest impact on people's outcomes. So just understanding really the peer support model wasn't there. And so the value of peer support was not widely understood in the circle of care. We didn't have the data or the evidence to be able to show that or prove that, that what the peer workers were doing was actually creating a difference to individuals. Next slide, please. Okay, I already let that cat out of the bag. That's a root cause. So we can go to the next one. So then we were allowed, the most exciting part was we were actually began to generate some change ideas. And so this was the people that were actually present in the room, even though Betty Lou and Jody were on the phone and Ed was taking the picture in there. But that was us just a couple of weeks back going through some ideas of how we can actually influence an increase in people's understanding and education around peer support work and the evidence. So if we go to the next one. So we did go through an activity, and I'm actually not entirely sure what it's called, but we did go through the activity of saying if nothing changed, you know, and we couldn't gather understanding what types of things would be happening. So helped us think about the negative, and then we switched those ideas of really how we could begin to increase people's understanding. And so we ended up landing, we were talking about kind of quick wins, some impact, things that were already set up. And so we know that there's lots of work to be done innovatively, like creating orientations and different types of things. But just to really start to gather a bit of understanding, we went along with things that were in place. So on a monthly basis at the hospital, there is something called Journal Club, where one of the staff comes. It could be a doctor, it could be a nurse. The peer support workers have done it before, but they bring a journal article and they present to their colleagues about it. And again, recognizing the culture where obviously, well, all of us should be, that evidence really matters and we need to speak to what the actual results are showing us. So there was an article actually that Ed had just found about the impact that peer support work is having in the hospitals and preventing people from coming back into hospital. And so we talked about having one of our key champions, one of the psychiatrists, Dr. Ian Daw, actually do a Journal Club presentation alongside the peer workers on those outcomes. And so they usually have a fairly good turnout. We would have the article ready to share and really just kind of keep track of how many people participated in that as one idea to really kind of, as we talked about, get people excited about the idea of what peer support is and what it can do. And the second piece was really just actually having some clear, concrete information about what peer support was that would be accessible to the individuals on the unit. So if nurses didn't really understand or weren't referring to peer workers or bringing them around, that individuals could actually ask for it, that they would also understand what it is, and that just having the material available and around could also support some understanding and better education of the staff on the unit. So there is an attempt now for us to create just a little information pamphlet with some quotes and feedback from people on the unit that have actually received peer support, and we'll co-create that with the patients and nurses to make sure that it's clear and easy to understand about what the peer work role is and what can be done. And so we'll keep track of how many were given out and then the number of inquiries that are happening with the nurses based off of the fact that there's more widespread information about the peer roles. Next slide. So what's next for us is that obviously we want to implement some of these ideas and then see what kind of difference they made. So we want to increase the peer staff and the supervisors about what they're feeling about the culture of understanding peer support with their coworkers. We want to do another survey to see if the inpatient staff have increased their understanding of what peer roles are. And then what was really neat was that E-QIP was actually a change idea. So bringing us all together, allowing us to focus on peer support and really talking and rolling this survey out and really talking in depthly about what the foundations of peer support actually caused change on the unit. So the guys actually, the peer workers were asked to do less things outside of scope once that kind of happened. And so we recognized that we might not even see such a big change. So we asked them to just actually create a qualitative list of what their roles looked like before the E-QIP project started. So how were things going? What were the types of things that they were asked to be doing? And then once these change ideas are implemented, if they can create the list again so that we can kind of see how their roles have also changed based off of their coworkers better understanding how to kind of keep them in scope. And so a risky assumption that we had put there was that the lack of understanding will be changed with education alone. And so we know that further thinking needs to come around how we're going to embed this into policies and procedures, orientations, referrals, and that kind of stuff. So this is really just the tip of the iceberg for us. Next slide, please. So the next slide is really what our key overall challenges with this. Well, one of the big ones was actually just trying to find the time to bring everyone together. So because we were all from different areas in general, location-wise, it was sometimes a bit challenging. We made it work, but it did sometimes stall us by a bit of time trying to make sure we were all available. And also recognizing we were looking at finding how to shift a culture and philosophy long ingrained in healthcare system that places medical interventions at the top. So we really have to, get creative about how we were doing that. Next slide, please. So what were we most excited about? Really taking the time to be able to focus on peer support in the hospital setting, and that we could actually get to a place where we might be able to offer more authentic peer work to individuals. And potentially, there's always an enthusiasm about adding more peer workers. So if we can create some more evidence in the environment there, we might be able to see that. So some of the things that enabled the project process and pace is there was a genuine interest from the Trillium leadership to do things differently. So from their chief mental health psychiatrist, Ian Daw, and then Shailene Bates, there was definitely an enthusiasm from them that they wanted to focus on peer support and better understand what was going on. That we were able to do all of this co-developing with the peer staff, that the coaching team helped to keep us on point. And that this is actually part of the work Betty Lou and I do, that we're focused on how do we implement peer work authentically. So it was really great that we were able to garner some of the tools and time and attention to go with one of our partners and really focus in. Next slide. Almost there. So what would we do differently next time? I think we talked about buy-in from leaders, just a little bit more to ensure staff are backfilled to do the E-QIP project. So the unique thing many of you may know if you're in the hospital setting is that we would have the meetings in the hospital, but then if there was codes and different things, then the staff would have to leave to go deal with that. And so obviously that's the priority, absolutely. And so how are we able to actually make space and time for quality improvement in those types of settings? So figuring out how we could have maybe backfilled the work so there wasn't so much strain on the hospital staff to try to be juggling both, and also potentially engaging the nursing staff at the start too. So even though we had a robust team, when it was already hard to keep everyone in the room, we would have had to figure out another plan to potentially take some more people off of the floor, like the nursing staff, to be involved. And the impact on your organization beyond the project and project team. So just bringing the E-QIP project to Trillium created a shift, as I said. And so, I made it earlier. I took the thunder out of that point. Okay, next, and the final slide. So the next steps is that we're going to stay committed to following through on this work because it is in scope for the Center for Innovation and Peer Support. And Trillium is already a partner of ours, and we're all committed to doing this work. The Trillium team and their leadership champions, they champion peer support and want to see more of it, and this will help make the case on how to do that. This work will become a case study for other partners regionally to learn how to use the survey and tools we offer. So Jody's been working hard at creating a guideline so other places can actually use the validated tool. And we want to tell people, don't just use the tool and then, tuck the results away. Look at them and how can you do quality improvement with the results. So we kind of want to do a little bit of highlight this scenario in the case study and include that in our guidelines. And that is it. I hope I was fast enough. I know we're right at the end.
Great job, both of you. And I did unmute Jody. I didn't know if she wanted to say anything. No, maybe she has herself muted. So any questions for the Center for Peer Support? Okay, so I'm going to take
This is Jody, by the way, and I just wanted to congratulate Betty Lou and Christina on a great presentation. Thanks.